We have a problem. Too many people are uneducated about pesticides while ingesting them every day, which is another problem. So to combat that, I'm gonna tell you a story. A long time ago, Farmer George was growing some wheat to feed his family and his village. He sowed the seeds in October, watched the plants sprout, took care of them as they grew bigger and stronger, and when harvest time was just around the corner, a nasty bug infestation took out his entire crop in one fell swoop because there were no pesticides. And Farmer George, his family, and the whole village starved. This story might not be pretty, but it's the harsh reality. At least it was until 2500 BC, when the Sumerians rubbed foul-smelling sulfur compounds on their bodies to control insects and mites in belief that the stench would repel them? Well, that has nothing to do with crops. So until Cato, a censor of the Roman state who lived around 200 BC, advocated the use of a spray made from the oils of the hellebore plant to kill rodents and insects. But at around 1000 BC, the Chinese had already been using predatory ants to combat insects in the citrus orchards. From then on, there were some experiments with chemicals like arsenic, but the good stuff came only recently in the 20th century. For example, the first aerial application of insecticides was done in 1921 when Ohio farmers were battling the Catalpa sphinx moth. And in 1934, the fungicide theorem was invented, which led to the development of many effective and widely used fungicides in the next 10 years. Also, in 1939, DDT was invented and quickly rose in popularity, but was banned along with other organochlorine compounds in the 1970s and 80s, cause it's some nasty stuff. So this was the brief history of pesticides, which by the way happened so that the future Farmer George has something to feed his children with. Well, nowadays, George and his family maybe wouldn't starve, at least in the Western world, but could easily go bankrupt if they lost the whole crop. So from a conventional farmer's perspective, pesticides and fertilizers, but this video is only about pesticides, are the only things that can ensure his harvest and survival. And that comes in handy sometimes. So, now that we know how, when and why pesticides became a crucial part of farming, it might surprise you that farming isn't the only industry that they are a crucial part of. Let's look at the current global scale of pesticides. Or maybe first, let's hear the definition. They are chemical substances used to prevent, destroy, repel or mitigate any pest ranging from insects, i.e. insecticides, rodents, i.e. rodenticides, and weeds, herbicides, to microorganisms, i.e. algicides, fungicides or bactericides. And since the description is pretty broad, you might imagine that the real-world use case is too, as is your exposure to them. So whenever you wanna get rid of the mold in your bathroom, protect your house and garden from whatever bugs, or make sure that your wooden furniture doesn't rot away, you are likely to use some form of pesticide. And this all leads to 5.6 billion pounds of pesticides being used worldwide every year. But of course, about 90% of them end up in agriculture and on your food plate or tap water. So how dangerous really is the consumption of pesticides? I did some research and figured out that there are two answers to this question. One is scientific and the other is pragmatic. The scientific applies again only to people living in the Western world, because our farmers are educated about what products to use and how to use them. And the whole pesticide market is regulated by national agencies that approve new and better stuff and phase out the old toxic stuff as scientific progress is made. And thanks, or according to these agencies, the toxicity and amounts of pesticides used in developed countries have been steadily going down. So nowadays, even if there are some residues on your apple, the stuff isn't that toxic, and more importantly, the dose is so low that you have nothing to worry about. On the other hand, developing countries tend to lack such agencies and market regulations. And frankly, many of the farmers just spray whatever they can get their hands on, often in improper doses, as there ain't nobody that would tell them the best practices. Luckily, this situation is starting to get a bit better as farmer education centers are popping up, for example in India. But the pragmatic answer is, how can we know that the scientists know? When you look at it, DDT was banned because of its devastating long-term effects on the natural ecosystems. And because it builds up in the fatty tissue of animals, including humans, can cause cancer and is toxic to the liver as well as the nervous system. Yet, in its heyday, nobody knew that, and DDT was even advertised as safe for children. So it would be very strange if there wasn't something similar going on as we speak, wouldn't you say? But we'll find out in 10 years maybe. Now, I predict that with the development of precision farming, we'll use less and less pesticides more efficiently until maybe one day we won't need them at all. For example, thanks to indoor farms. But the thing is that right now, almost every farmer is using them, even if his farm is organic. And if we were to wake up tomorrow and there were suddenly no pesticides, the world would probably end. Because we are still very much dependent on them. So my message is, if you believe in science and live in the Western world, you should be safe buying whatever produce you want. If you don't believe in science, I would either have a talk with the farmer you are getting the food from, or grow your own food, as even organic farming isn't really the answer. I worked on an organic farm for some time, and apart from these two being the main herbicides, planters and harvesters, I also sprayed some insecticides. It wasn't synthetic or DDT, but it was still something. So you decide how you wanna go about it, and thanks for watching.